1. Hello and welcome to Som Sense. I'm your host, Rachel K. Ng, and today we are joined by the amazing, wonderful Rich Mitch, aka Duck, that we all know and love. Hi, Rich. How are you today?
Hello, I am okay. Thank you very much. How are you?
I am excellent. Thank you. I'm so excited to chat. I know we've both been really busy, so it's been a while since we've been able to sit down and talk about all things fragrance. So I'm super excited.
Yes, I am too.
Awesome. And then, so for today's chat, we're gonna talk about a couple different things. One of them kind of was sparked off by one of Duck's videos from a few weeks ago, where he had some really tremendous insights about the industry in general, and Rich was kind of talking about his incredible observation that he feels, and I completely agree, and I think a lot of people would agree, that the fragrance industry in general, especially kind of the corporate commercial industry, seems to be producing at an extremely fast rate a lot of fragrances that smell very, very similar. Again, this is all of our opinions. We're not claiming that this is the 100% truth. We're here to talk about our opinions. So in our impression, there's a lot of fragrances that are coming out that smell very similar. Why is that? Where are the big blockbusters that are going to kind of, usher in the new era of scents, of fragrances, the big masterpieces? What's going on with that? What are the conditions within the industry that are making this kind of glut of fragrances come out? So we're going to talk about this a little bit, what we think is going on in the industry, just as outsiders, as consumers, right? Because we are consumers, right? We are fragrance lovers. We try to pay attention. We try to educate ourselves to make the best purchases possible and to talk about it amongst ourselves so we can all make the best decisions for ourselves, so that we're happy and that we love our hobby and we have the fragrances that we love. So we're going to try to figure out what's going on in our opinions. So Rich, what are your ideas about this?
So, hello. I was thinking out loud on my channel on a live stream, as I tend to do, and like you say, I just sort of opined that I thought lots and lots of designer fragrances now smell almost identical. Almost identical. And it's not just a style of perfume. I don't feel like it's just a stylistic choice. I feel like it's more sort of acute than that. No. What's the opposite of acute? Chronic. I feel like we have gone into chronic decline. And I feel like it has become like part of the, like it's become endemic. It's become part of the market, for lack of a better word. It feels like it's become ingrained in perfume and designer houses, that their fragrances should be geared towards sales and nothing else.
Right.
And I feel that, so if I try and crystallize the problem before I sort of like analyze why I think it is, I feel like almost every designer fragrance now has very little difference between the next designer fragrance from a completely different house. They are usually, they feel synthetic, and by synthetic I don't mean that they use synthetic materials. I mean they feel like they are unnatural smell. It's not like something like that. They feel like you wouldn't find any of these smells in the wild, like, and combined together they create this kind of like X perfume, something outside of like your olfactive experience. And I feel like that is like a stylistic choice, but I feel that the consequence of that stylistic choice is to go down this very narrow road, and part of the reason for that is the lack of. So I'll move on to the analysis of the problem now. I feel like a lot of the licenses that are used to for houses to create their perfumes and stuff are taken by very few bigger umbrella corporate providers. So if you look at Kering, who own YSL and have just bought Creed, they have the license for YSL, but they don't have the perfume license. They outsourced that to who did they outsource? L'Oreal, I believe.
Interesting.
So L'Oreal make these perfumes, and they have deals in place with certain flavor houses, with certain who use certain perfumers, who are incentivized to use certain chemicals because they are the latest ones that these companies have put research and development money into. And so the perfumers are encouraged to use them. And so the gene pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller the further up the chain you go. And the fragrances, what happens is that the product of that gene pool feels like these inbred fragrances, these fragrances which are all very samey. They're all using the same materials by different perfumers, but who are trying to use who are being incentivized to do the same things as other perfumers, but maybe they have certain data and analytics that will show them which are the more popular which are the more popular ingredients and which are the more popular combinations of ingredients. And I feel like we are getting into we are in the position of a creative industry which now relies so much on analytics and focus groups and an ever decreasing pool of ingredients to choose from. I'm not sure if I'm mixing my metaphors there, but like an ever decreasing palette of ingredients to choose from. And it doesn't provide the richness and the plurality which used to exist up until about 25, 30 years ago. Or even later, really. I mean, even up to 10, 15 years ago, the consolidation of these companies, things like Kering, LVMH, the other one, L'Oreal, and then you've got these substructures between them, such as IFF, Givaudan, Simrise, Taxego. They are kind of all intertwined, but instead of it providing a wider spectrum, the spectrum stays the same size, but the separate structures within it restrict the richness of the plurality and the resolution of the overall picture. You know, it feels like we're getting down to like sort of this very sort of shrunken, anemic palette of ingredients, where Akigala wood is in 30-40% of perfumes, and then it becomes an even bigger part of those perfumes that are being released. And then the market forces and the market kind of reacts so nimble. The market's very nimble, but the creativity isn't quick enough to get away from it. So there's more sort of predation onto copying someone else. Somebody releases a Ventus Creed, and then you see within 5-10 years that a lot of fragrances have moved in that kind of musky, fruity, sweet direction, and then someone releases Baccarat Rouge, and it takes another twist, but it always follows it. Everybody seems to converge on the same path, you
Mhm.
know, and then everybody's trying to release the next thing. I recently tried a brand called Clone Keen from
Mm.
Ireland, and excuse me, and the perfumes, while they were quite good, there was nothing there from this very small niche brand in Ireland. There was nothing there that I felt I hadn't smelled before.
Mhm.
You know, it
Yeah.
was the same ingredients in slightly different concentration and slightly different structure, and it combined to basically give the same effect. You know, and it was really disappointing, because you're thinking, this is a tiny niche brand from Ireland, no one's ever heard of it, there must be something different here. They had a rose oud. They had to be fair, the rose oud sort of like stuck with me, because I was like, why do these people have it? It wasn't a rose, it was like a saffron oud. It was like an oud rose without the rose in it. It had the
Interesting. Yeah.
saffron, it had the amber wood, it had that really overly familiar vibe
Yeah.
that you've come to expect. When I say it was a rose oud, you know what it smells like already. You don't need to reach for the nearest oud rose in your perfume, in your collection, because you already know what it smells like. You've
Yes.
smelled it before, you'll smell it again. And it's become one of these genres that that the brands feel that the materials are very available. The perfume houses want to push those materials because they've got them available. They know it works in some case, so if they keep throwing shit at the wall, some of it'll stick. And it's like the brands don't have any incentive to stop doing this, because they get enough sales to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
You know, and and since it's not individual brands such as Clune Keen themselves, but whoever they've gone to make the perfume,
Yes.
those people who they have outsourced the making of the perfume to have every incentive to shift these well-worn chemicals than Clune Keen have for the oversight, because all that says, Givaudan will come back and says, well, it's worked before. Don't you want a perfume that'll sell?
Absolutely. And I think I completely agree with everything you're saying. And it's so interesting because I don't think either one of us, we don't want to, we don't want to, they're hardworking, brilliant perfumers who are caught in the system, right? There are lots of good people. Like no one is out there rubbing their hands trying to be evil, but like you're talking about monopoly, you're talking about supply chain issues, you're talking about financial incentives that kind of like they crush people, they capture people in this system, and people are just trying to go to work, do their job as well as they can, make a living. And I think if you talk to enough perfumers, like the perfumers will tell you, one-on-one, yeah, this is an issue, this is a problem, we're not sure what to do, how do we fix this? But all of these things, like they make everything kind of bad for everyone, I think. And so I think you're exactly right. And I think that, so, we end up with, again, there's an overproduction, like literally so much waste, like things are being made, too many things are being made, right? And again, I think a lot of it is to do with, you have these big corporate structures, these are international conglomerations, they're monopolies, they're overproducing, right? Because they need PR, they need the next thing. There's this kind of artificial drive driven by, the quarterly profit structure of corporations, which is completely artificial, right? But that's the structure, right? And you have people managing perfume companies who are business people, and they have maybe different priorities than, say, a perfumer might, a perfumer might want to make something beautiful, something quality, but then they have all these other pressures and incentives, like you're saying, use this new chemical compound, which to a perfumer might be super interesting. They might think, wow, this new smell. It is really interesting. And I do want to do something interesting with it. But are they given the time? No, right? Are they giving the leeway to use the, like you were saying, the full palette that exists? So according to someone like Christophe Laudemiel, who I recommend everyone to go and look at his ethics in perfumery, kind of how would you say that? Is it a statement or a project that he has? You can Google it and find it, where he kind of points out a lot of even more issues than I think we're talking about, as someone who has been a professional perfumer in this system and who still works as a professional perfumer. He kind of talks about a lot of these issues where, the perfumers might, like, the business says, okay, we're going to say it's jasmine from grass, and it might be 0.0001% of jasmine from grass, but really the perfumers feel pressure to use aroma chemicals. And again, I know, Rich, you and I both know there's nothing wrong with aroma chemicals. There have been aroma chemicals in perfumery since the beginning. There always will be. But it's kind of a question of balance. It's a question of artistic freedom. It's a question of ethics, of what you're telling the consumer, how you're representing what's in the bottle, how you're communicating. It's are you trying to do something beautiful and quality that people will enjoy and make money? Or are you just trying to make every single, like, half of a cent that you can, and are really not being ethical, not being really as truthful as you can be about what's going on in the system? It's just, there's so many, I think there's so many issues in the industry that's producing this. I mean, it's really like, people in YouTube are talking about like the death of luxury in general. I think fragrance is part of that, is that, people aren't receiving high, like, the prices are so high, but the quality of products that people are receiving, especially from these big monopolies, these big corporations, people are starting to see there's this big gap. So it's a great thing that you're doing, Rich, is to start to identify these issues and see how it's so sclerotic, how it's so like it's like hardened arteries almost, where people can't change and move, and there's so much pressure, and people aren't allowed to do their jobs well, I think. My impression from the outside, right, as a consumer. I've never worked in the fragrance industry. I don't work in the fragrance industry. Yeah.
I feel like the current trend, this kind of place that creative industry has got itself into at the minute, because it's a wider problem than just perfume, but we talk about through the prism of perfume, is that the big companies, the LVMHs, the Chanels, have got themselves to a point where it's almost like if they were a national economy, they'd be overheating. They'd be doing too much. They're bound. It feels like they are heading towards a massive crash, and we might not see it in the short or the medium term, but it feels like they're getting too big.
Yeah.
They are monopolizing, and they are constricting, like you say, like sclerotic. They are constricting the flow. They are controlling the flow, and like this. My friend has this saying that you can't create and edit at the same time, and it feels like these big corporations are editing the market to their advantage as much as they possibly can. They're making the weather with an eye to making more money, and it feels like they're overriding, leading to only ambition is making more money than they made before. Yeah. And to do that, they have to widen and maximize the profit. They have to widen the price paid, and they have to inflate the price that the consumer is paying, and they have to shrink the price that they are paying. And that is one of the best ways for them to make more money. And this is having the effect of stifling creativity, because the creativity is risky. and they have this other way of producing that relies a lot less on creativity than it does on data and data mining, and that the numbers aren't creative, like that, and they only follow those numbers. Numbers are used as a system of counting, and like you apply one to one thing, two to two things, three to three things. You know, you're assigning numbers to things. It's not a way to create something. Um, it feels like these corporations are how can I put it, institutionally incapable of creativity, or
Mm.
they are institutionally against creativity, because what it means to them is that it might literally take a 90-degree like turn away from the plans that they've already made. They're trying to control cause and effect, you
Mm.
know. It's all about their it's all about their control and their one foot in front of the other, unstoppable momentum, and it's about financial growth. It's about numbers and hidden, not hidden, hidden's the wrong word for it, but like these kind of invisible drivers, these kind of it's it's like they've reduced creativity to the point where it's become like a four-letter word to them. Like creativity is like a swear word. You know, like don't say that. Somebody might hear you. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
like the creativity is like don't do that. Just like, here are the materials that we want you to use. This is the data we've got. This is what people want. Make these two things fit into each other. You've got the materials. This is what people want. You make it because you know chemistry. Don't fiddle with it. Don't mess around. Just do what you're told, you know? And that's kind of how it feels at the minute. There's the perfumers don't feel like perfumers in the creative aspect anymore. They feel like chemists. And
Mm.
that's kind of what perfumers have been reduced to, chemists.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I feel like, oh, you make so many great points. Like, first of all, I mean, perfumery is such an interesting art form because it does connect so many realms. It connects science and art um, together in these really interesting ways. And I feel like, they're gonna, like, to be an important brand, you do have to lead. You can't just follow or think, oh, we're just gonna try to figure out what the audience wants and give it to them. Well, that's not going to work in a creative industry. That's not going to work because you have to lead. You have to make something interesting and new that people will be attracted to. Otherwise, your business is going to fall apart. So first of all, they need to start leading again, right? By making interesting things that people will be attracted to, because that's what fashion is, right? It's a la mode. It's the next thing. It's the interesting thing. It's the avant-garde. And so by cutting off, because most businesses, they want to automate everything, just like you're saying. They want to get rid of the human. They want to get rid of the thing that doesn't work like a computer, the thing with emotions, the thing with problems, the thing that calls in sick, right? And so if you get rid of that creativity, that volatility, that's creativity, it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Fail. So they need to start, leading again. Like having Alexander McQueen's, having Galliano's, having people with interesting, fresh, new ideas. And I think the other thing they need to do is, just like you said, it's a pacing issue. It's a time issue. Like, why do you have to release 100 flankers, like, just for PR, for the PR schedule to work? Why not? I mean, I think honestly, Chanel is a good example of this. Is they don't release a million fragrances a year. They have time. They take time, at least from what I understand. Again, as an outsider, all of this is just my opinion. There are houses that do take time. They don't release a million fragrances a year. Like, why not? Why can't the industry give, like, privilege and give the benefit of the doubt to their creatives, let their creatives have time and some freedom and some trust. Give your creatives the benefit of the doubt and give them time to work on something really unique and interesting that might actually be the next BR 540 that everyone else wants to, that will sell forever and that everyone wants to have, like the next Dior, um, for the next, you know, blockbuster success that everyone wants to have. Like that is a great investment. So I can't figure out in my mind, like, what are these things about these companies where they just don't want to do that? Why that's, I think you're right, Rich. It's risky, right? They don't want the risk.
Yeah.
And that's, back in the day, when companies were owned by maybe families, they wanted that risk. They wanted to take that risk because it was interesting. If I owned a small business, I would want to do that, right? Because it's
Yeah.
interesting and fun and it has value in society. But corporations don't think like that.
No, no, they don't. They are driven. They are driven. I don't know if it's a legal requirement, or whether it is simply greed, just the corporate culture. But they are driven solely by money and sales and analytics and data and things like that. And you've seen what analytics have done to even the YouTube space, social media. Um, Analytics have driven people to growth and and fabulous numbers, but you watch the content and it's dead. It's crap. It's boring. It's incredibly
Yeah.
dissatisfying. You
Yeah.
know, it's so dissatisfying, and that's what it feels like with the perfumes that are being released as well. They feel dissatisfying. They feel boring. They feel like it's a feedback loop. It just goes on forever with an ever decreasing quality of like of the product, you
Yeah.
know and yet it just keeps going and going and going round and round. And the recent, well, I say recent, I mean it's got to be in at least 6 months now since the big perfume producers were raided by UK, US, and EU regulators
Yeah.
for, I think they were conspiring to affect the market or something like that, allegedly. And to be honest, it feels like that from an end product perfume consumer like aspect. It feels like somebody's been saying they can't go anywhere else if we're the only ones controlling what they want. And then it gets a little bit like Big Brother, like we control the narrative, we control the ingredients, we control the supply, we control the prices, we control the thought process, and I have this joke that I say to a lot of my American friends, where I say that Americans always thought that communism would come in by the government. But it seems to be, and it seems to feel like this kind of communism, this kind of one party, one company aspect is coming in through big corporate business and not government. It's
Right.
coming in through this kind of singular expression is being brought to you by one of 5, 6 companies which all share the same goals.
Yeah, and supply chains too. I mean, access to materials. So it's interesting because in America we're lucky here. We have a lot of. I mean, I'm sure obviously in Europe too. I happen to live in America, but we have a lot of independent artisanal perfumers, and you know, a lot of them get their materials from the same oil houses. Like again, that's another place where I feel like there's a lot of monopoly, right?
Yeah,
With just the supply chain. And so some artisanal perfumers here are like, well, okay, they struggle with the same things, even though they want to do something new and interesting, creative, and take all the time in the world. Sourcing materials and even trying to source materials ethically, because a lot of them, at least that I've talked to, say, hey, wait a minute, when we see the supply chains and how the supply chains are controlled by corporations, what we're seeing is colonialism, right? We see
Yeah.
it's the exact same patterns, power structures, even people, even the same exact families, same family names, just different first names of, of actual colonists who, went, you know, stole land, used the French government to go to war with a nation, to conquer a nation, to enslave people, or something very close to that in terms of wealth extraction versus if you look at a lot of where the materials come from, the people, the nations that own the nations where these materials come from, they don't really benefit from their own natural resources because that wealth is extracted by these companies and very little is given to them in return. And that's pretty normal in the industry right now. And that's a legacy of colonialism, right?
Yeah, like the structure of the structure of the like the method was like laid down back then as a
Yes.
high profit, high return,
Yes.
low risk kind of thing, and it's that kind of thinking,
Yes.
that that kind of method, that thinking, that belief of that entitlement as well, that just gives you the sheer gall to go out there and just be like, this isn't yours, this is mine, I
Yes.
know what's for the best, you sit back, you know just what to say,
Yeah.
just what to do. And it goes from the top of the chain to the bottom and then back again, or the bottom of the chain to the top and then back down to the bottom again. It's like
Yeah.
it's these companies will take like um I don't know, Chanel. Well, like Chanel's vertically integrated,
Mm.
which means that they do everything in house, so they can keep. Now there are positives and there are negatives to that. The thing that the main positive is that they have control over everything and they can standardize and keep everything just as they want it.
Yeah.
The negative to that is that they control everything and that they can keep everything to just how they want it. It's the same sword cuts both ways. you
Mm-hmm.
know um you lack then the plurality. And this is my major problem. It feels like these companies, like, again, to go back and put this through the prism of perfume, it feels like companies like um Simrise, Takasago, IFF, Givaudan, all of these, and then companies like BlackRock and Kering and LVMH, all of these things. It feels like what they've done is that they just go out and they've copied like the Microsoft sort of corporate idea, which is to just buy up companies, startup companies and smaller companies, through the fear that one day they may actually rise to challenge them,
Yes.
and just nip it in the bud. But
Mm-hmm.
what that does is it completely stifles competition. It completely kills it dead.
Yeah.
If you think of it like a garden, it's like pouring poison on the rest of the garden to
Yeah.
save one plant, to save one big sunflower, and the rest of them and all the other plants in the garden can't grow unless they are part of the sunflower's kind of
Mm-hmm.
extended root system.
Absolutely.
And you go back like 30-40 years. You've got if we because I know we're going to talk about perfumes, like individual perfumes, after this topic, and how different perfumes have like changed perfume over the years. If you go back and you look at the history of Koros, which I am extremely familiar with, it was first produced by a company called Charles of the Ritz,
Mm.
and then it was produced by Parfums Corps. Then it was produced by Sanofi. Then they were bought up by Gucci, which brought it into their sphere of influence, the Gucci PPR. And then Gucci outsourced it to L'Oreal. All the way through, each time that happened, the company that bought the rights to make the perfume was a bigger company than the company that came before. And if you go with the general consensus, the perfume got worse every time that happened.
Yeah.
So if you look at Koros, everybody clamors the one that everybody wants is the Charles of the Ritz, because it was the original.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would say the best.
Mm-hmm.
And then Parfums Co was a slightly bigger establishment than Charles of the Ritz, and they reformulated and made it with their thing. So everything tends towards this kind of great attractor of falling at, like, these huge company feels like they're like a gravity well, and things are just, as night follows day, like the law of gravity just sucks in. That's the point we've got to at this point. The bigger the structure, the more gravity it has, and the harder it is to resist falling into this giant black hole, this corporate black hole from which there is no return. The only way that a company that they just get passed around. Look at BlackRock. BlackRock bought Creed for $1 billion 3 years ago, sold it recently to Kering for $3.5 billion.
Wow.
What did BlackRock do with Creed in those 3.5 years to increase the value of the company by $3.5 billion? Absolutely nothing. They released one perfume, Windflowers.
Yeah.
And it's like that is not a great perfume. It's not an instant classic. It's not a big seller. So what exactly did BlackRock do with that company to increase the price by like a factor of 3.5?
Nothing. I mean, it's everything you're saying is exactly right. And it's so, as a consumer, it is so frustrating because we don't ask that much, right? We don't ask that much. We ask for some common sense, some common decency to the people involved, the farmers, the earth, the consumer, just some basic common decency, right? And some quality, something interesting. We don't ask for a lot, right? And they're pushing to these limits that, I mean, it's sad, really. And maybe we can start talking about, so we don't get too bummed out. Maybe we can start talking about some really groundbreaking perfumes that were inspirational, that were really that did change the game, that were that were leaders, right? That were inspirational, that we could look for, like, what do we want? What kind of things do we want to see in the future, right? So, like, when I think of the kind of perfumes that I would want to see in the future, a person that comes to mind is Rudnitska, right? There was a perfumer that, I mean, I don't know him. I wasn't alive at that time, but according to what I've read, Edmund Rudnitska had a lot of time. He was given a lot of time and a lot of space and a very free hand with materials to work and develop interesting, unique fragrances. And he took that time, right? He wasn't overburdened. He just wasn't overburdened. He had real, genuine time to be in nature, to smell nature, to think about things. Because if you've ever tried, like, I do some creative things as a pastime, as a hobby, and you really do need time to actually think, right? To think, to wonder, to let your mind wander and explore, to have unique experiences as a human, with other humans, with other arts, to go to museums, to listen to music, to have your soul, your mind, and your heart filled with things. That's how the creative process works, and it's you really can't rush it. So something like really any of Edmund Rudnitska's creations, I would say, hey, they were unique, they were interesting. He had time as an artist. That's, to me, that stands out as an example. How about for you, Duck?
So I kind of feel like I want to use the word anxiety. I feel like there's this anxiety in business in general, but certainly in corporate, that, like, if you aren't doing things at a breakneck pace. If you aren't doing things quickly, you aren't doing them properly.
Mm.
You know, like they feel like this is like a way, like, you know, the whole thing, time is money.
Yes.
So they would think that if it's taking too long, there's something inherently wrong. You know,
Yes.
there must be something wrong. Why is it taking so long? What's the problem? And it comes back to this elemental human thing, like of anxiety,
Mm.
and this kind of this kind of fear, because anxiety, fear, very much linked and stuff like that. It's all a response to fight or flight. You know what I mean? It's it feels like poison to creativity, though,
Yeah.
to um to doing something different. It's literal anathema to it. It doesn't compute for a lot of the people who are in charge, because they are inevitably very successful. I forget the guy who's in charge of LVMH. Arnaud, someone Arnaud, and you've got to imagine he has his work methods, right? And for him, they've worked. You know, you look at it over the years, that man has made billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, and he thinks he can apply that logic to anything. And if people would only listen, then it would work for them as well. Um, Rudnitska had a lot of time. I would agree. I've sort of gone off on a bit of a tangent there.
Great.
Rudnitska,
I agree.
Rudnitska had a lot more time. You're right, and he didn't make a lot of perfumes. The sort of the it's not the irony, but the the quandary, the mystery that we've got at the minute is that we've got more perfumers than ever. There are
Yeah.
more perfumers active now than ever, right? And yet the quality's gone down through the floor. I don't know whether it's because we've diluted the prerequisite of actual talent, because all these perfumers have got to have jobs, you know, and all of this sort of thing. I don't know whether the talent is diluted, or whether it's because the um, the requirements on them are so different now that we are lacking the perfumes that we feel we deserve. But you would think just by pot luck, one of them would be able to get something past the corporate section of like the analysis, the people who check the work. I forget what they're called. The evaluators. You'd think they'd be able to get something past one of those, that just by the law of averages. But there's been nothing. I was talking on my stream the other day about best designer perfumes since 2010, and I was like, well, there are precious few. You
Yeah.
know, there are precious few. The designer sphere has become like an underclass for perfume.
Yeah.
I said probably my favorite men's fragrance since 2010 is probably Gucci Guilty Absolute, but then a couple of other people came back with Eau Sauvage Parfum, which is very, very good, and a couple other ones, which I can't really remember. But if you look at the big sellers, it's been more down to marketing than it has been to actual quality
Yes.
of the fragrance, you know, in my opinion. There's a
Right.
lot of people out there could just totally disagree, but I think Sauvage is like not all Sauvage, the Johnny Depp one, is absolutely woeful. It gives me a headache every time I smell it. It's got that horrible metallic grapefruit kind of dry, dusty amber faux incense thing going on, which I just find really, really awful. But that's one of the perfumes that has completely changed the perfume industry. It's not the type of perfume I want to see change the industry, because I don't think it changed it for the better. but it
Mm.
was literally like almost at like a 90-degree angle. It was like at a right angle to all perfumes that came before it, maybe with the exception of Bleu de Chanel, um, which isn't quite as bad as Sauvage. Like the EDT
Right.
isn't quite as bad as Sauvage, but it's still pretty rough. The whole blue perfume thing coming out was grim. Um, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, no, no. I was laughing. I agree.
All right. It's so about if we talk about perfumes that legitimately move the dial, change things in totally different ways. I'm torn between. I'm torn between. I mean, it depends how far you want to go back. We can go to like Eau de Cologne Imperial by Guerlain, and we could talk about Jackie, and we could talk about Lorignon by oh God, who made Lorignon? Was it Lancôme? I don't
I'm
think so. It
I'm
was
sorry.
somebody. Somebody made Lorignon. There was stuff like Shalimar, Mitsuko, all the classics by Guerlain. They did a lot of those. But if we get into the second half of the 20th century, I'll take as my starting point Pour Monsieur
Mm.
by Chanel,
Yeah.
because Eau Sauvage came out after that. Um, and I feel like those two fragrances are they're similar, but they're not bound together. I don't think you get Eau Sauvage without Pour Monsieur first.
Mm.
You know, I
Yeah.
think that style of fragrance, because there wasn't really many perfumes for men back then.
Yeah.
Um, there were a few, but it's not like, I mean, it's nothing like now. Nothing's like now. I mean, they release thousands of perfumes a year now, but like you've got to remember that the next Dior male perfume that came out after Eau Sauvage was Jules.
Oh,
I want to
wow.
say, so that's the best part of 20 years later.
Yeah.
That was 1980 or 81, one of the two, and then they managed to half it after that. They managed to go for 7 years, which then came Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Jules did not have the impact that Eau Sauvage had, and certainly didn't have the impact that Fahrenheit had.
No.
Um,
Fahrenheit's a
but
great example. Also, yeah.
yes, yeah, Fahrenheit's seminal perfumes, one of the great perfumes of all time, like one of the great men's perfumes of all time, if not the greatest. It's hard to make a case against it being the greatest, because of how it was a rare case of one of those perfumes that was critically acclaimed and wildly popular at the same time.
Yes. Absolutely.
It was, and that's a really hard trick to pull off in any creative industry.
Yeah. It was
So like,
intellectually interesting and viscerally pleasurable. To me, that's a hard thing to do, both of those at the same time, as well as, like you said,
yes,
being popular on all the levels. So yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was really, really like outrageously popular. Like everyone had a bottle, and it continued to sell for like well over, like it was like 15 years. It wasn't the biggest seller after like 5 years when stuff like Joop came out and other things came out. But what we can talk about is a small period of time there where you had releases like Fahrenheit, Joop, Pour Homme. You had the other one, Cool Water, right? Those three fragrances, right? How different are they? They
Yeah.
are incredibly different. They came out within 2 years of each other,
That's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
We have not seen anything remotely approaching that
Yes.
in the last 10 years, in the last 5 or 10 years.
I think you're hitting on something really important, because I think a huge mistake that people, maybe corporate people, and again, I don't work in the industry, so maybe this is not right, but in trying to please everyone, you're going to please no one. So I think that just what you're saying, these fragrances, they weren't fragrances for everyone. They were fragrances for subsets of people that liked certain specific things, and they weren't trying to please everyone, right?
Yeah,
And so I think that's a huge mistake, because when you try to please everyone, you make crap. You make nothing. you just make nothing. It's bland. It pleases no one. And so I think like, and I feel like that's a huge problem today is people want AI, they want technology that try to please everyone, and it's just beige, and it's nothing. It's nothing, right? There's no content there. And so why not try to go after more subsets of people, which I think with AI, with technology, you could actually maybe do even a little better, because science has shown that, especially like with food, there are certain people, there are subsets of palates within food, people who enjoy more sour food, people who enjoy sweeter foods. And so you could absolutely do that. You could go after people who love, those like leather fragrances. You could go after people who love green I love green fragrances so much. And it's hard to find a good green fragrance in the designer realm, right? So sorry, I interrupted you, but I think exactly what you're saying is like I want to see exactly that today. I want to see a group of fragrances come out that are completely different from each other, right? That are going to please different
Yep.
people. And I don't want to like most of them. I just want to like one or two,
Yes. And it's this kind of, this lack, this is where the lack of plurality comes in. Because there's no kind of outlier. There's no there's no there's no one pulling on the market. Like, there's nobody affecting it or disrupting it. It just seems to be squeezing, constricting tighter and tighter and tighter every single day, and honing in and perfecting this kind of that feels like they're ascending a mountain to a peak, and once they get there, it's like there's nowhere to go. You can't go north from the North Pole, and they're all descending on this one destination. And when they get there, like the thing is that, will they ever get there? At what point do they say enough? Like, can this go on forever?
Yeah.
And I don't know at what point it stops. I don't know how like a corporate structure like that goes on ad infinitum, because at some point, like, you're gonna get checked, like, just by the laws of, like, the second law of thermodynamics. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's gonna fall apart at some point.
Yeah, entropy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It has to fall apart at some point. It's the way of the world.
Yeah.
So what are you doing along the way that is affecting the fucking, I'm getting really existential here, but like, what are you doing that's affecting the ecosystem along the world? Like, I'm not an eco warrior, but like, you are destroying, like, the ecosystem, so that you can have your money, your way, your ideas, your hegemony, and it's depleting everyone else. It's like it feels like you're being farmed.
Yeah.
I will try and get back to the topic now. So in this small period of time between 1986, 87 and 89, you had these three fragrances which have been massive ever since and still sell. Now, they'll sell a lot less than they used to, but it shows that, and two of the fragrances were made by Pierre Bourdon, who Pierre Bourdons don't come along every day. Nobody's expecting, like, somebody to be the next Pierre Bourdon. You can't make unrealistic expectations. But what I would say is that it's shown that it is possible, and it seems to be that perfume, the trade, its only focus now seems to be money, and it seems to have lost sight of how it got to where it is. I'm trying to think on the hoof about another time when 3 or 4 perfumes came out within 2 or 3 years, or even 1 year. I mean, you've got 1981 when Antaeus, Koros, and there's another one, and I really can't remember what it was. Was it Oscar Paul? All 3 of those are still in production. They created an entire genre themselves.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like and Antaeus is still for sale, although Chanel, they don't really discontinue fragrances. So it's hard to tell. But I mean, the last I checked, that the local Chanel boutique sells 1 bottle of Antaeus a month, which is pretty diabolical. But it's still a magnificent fragrance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, they all are. Yeah. I love
But like,
Antaeus.
yeah, but like Koros was recently discontinued in North America.
That's so sad. Yeah.
It is sad. It is sad. But these fragrances, like, they are totally out of date. Totally out of date. I'm not trying to say that we should go back to making Koroses,
right,
because it's unrealistic. As much as I would like it personally, I know that that's not going to happen.
right.
So, but that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't room for somebody to come along and do something such as Ganymede.
Yeah.
Like Ganymede, I do not like Ganymede. God, awful. Just this massive metallic futuristic robot bomb thing.
Yeah.
But
it's
interesting and it's different, and it's come from sort of left field. Like, it doesn't feel like it's come from anywhere. If you've been following Quentin Biche, you will have smelled the beginnings of this in other perfumes that he's done.
Yeah.
Like Le Fin du Monde. It's got that metallic flint stone kind of twang thing in, and that was 10 years ago, you know? So it's taken him 10 years to get to the point where he's made a perfume. And I mean, Dura Rose works in the only niche perfume shop in Ireland. And he says Ganymede walks out the door.
Wow.
He says he doesn't need, he says it's just the right perfume at the right place at the right time.
And it's interesting and new. It's not the same old. And I think people genuinely want that. You know, there is a market for it. You know, there's a market for risk, you know, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just for something different, just for something new. But it just seems that
such a struggle to get there somehow, you know?
Yeah, there's been a lot of upheaval in the world over the last 10 years or so. And, well, basically since like 2016. And all the, like, you've got all your like political stuff, your economic stuff, social stuff that's been going on since then. It's been a very, I mean, people that write books and lectures, and you'll be able to tell your grandkids about living through this weird time that we've been living in. But the thing is I go back to it, it's a source of great anxiety to all of us who were there, you know, because nobody knew what was going to happen next. And it feels like that's fed into the kind of culture and thoughts and thinking processes that these mega corporations, I'm not talking about like even big businesses. I'm talking about these massive, mega structures that we have now. You know, the too big to fail like companies, and that's the point that we've got to. You know, and it stifles creativity, because that includes that inherently means taking risks.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at now. These structures are too big. We rely on them too much. They generate too much money, which they certainly don't pay in fucking taxes. So I don't know why they're too big to fucking fail, because it won't affect us, because we don't take any money off them anyway.
Oh,
you know?
100%. Yes. They shouldn't exist, honestly.
Yeah. The whole plurality thing, and I always go back to an Italian perfume I had, like, because I collect vintages, obviously, and I have all these on the boxes. They've got the producers of who makes these perfumes. Hardly any of them exist anymore. Hardly any of them existing. One of the only ones that still exist is Euro Italia, the people who made the original Dolce & Gabbana Pour Homme.
Wow.
Euro Italia is one of the only ones that I think still exists. The oh god, the Creed never had like a had its own sort of producer because they used like IFF materials and stuff like that. Because I'm just looking at bottles now, trying to bring to memory which places. But you used to have all these different factories, and it's the same thing in fashion. You used to have all these brilliant little factories with the best artisans making things by hand,
Yes.
and the human touch, that kind of attention, you know. You talk to ladies who were into their fashion and things in the 80s and 90s, and they'll tell you customer service now is just not it's not what it was.
Yeah.
You know, it's and the whole, and that stretches from the very beginnings of a garment to the very selling of the garment, you know. And all the structures and the places and the materials that go with it, they've lost that kind of humanity that they had. And it feels like that's where we are with the perfumes. I'm still trying to think of a 2 or 3 year period where we had so many perfumes that were so successful and yet so like critically acclaimed as well, you know.
Yeah. I
And
hope.
I'm like thinking maybe 2004 to 2006. So you had Prada Amber Pour Homme in 2006. You had Dior Homme in 2005, and there was
Yeah.
another one. There was
Yeah.
another one that came out in 2004, and I cannot remember it for the life of me. But it was quite similar to those two. That soft kind of zeitgeist, and it sort of goes to what the briefs the perfumers are being given as well. So it's like a perfect storm. Like
Yeah.
the perfumers are being told, like, look, we need something that's going to sell. Whereas when Heidi Slimane did Dior Homme and the Dior Homme collection of clothes, you know,
Yeah.
and the Dior Homme perfume, it how much pressure was he under for it to be for it not to be just critically successful, but like commercially successful too, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guarantee there's a million more layers, because if you're working for an international conglomerate who, there's going to be 1,000 more layers of bean counters now than there ever were before when you were just a family business.
Yes.
So there's going to be that anxiety you're talking about for creatives, for everyone else. It's, God, it must be so stifling. I can't imagine, right? Trying to produce something artistic, right?
Yeah. It's you don't get houses. It feels like there's like a loss of know-how as well. You
Yes.
know, I'm looking at bottles I'm looking at a bottle of Timbuktu, and I'm looking at a bottle of Racine by Maitre Parfumi Elegantier. Both of those perfume houses were started by the same person. I think he was called Laporta or Laporte, his last name anyway. And he started both of those. He started one first and then sold it and started the other one. And I mean, in perfume circles, they are big names, you know.
Yeah.
Maitre Parfumi Elegantier,
Yeah.
and
Amazing.
especially the artisan in perfume circles, we know about them.
They're
People
wonderful.
listening to this, podcast will know about them, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But like the wider public, you might get the odd lucky person who knows about them. But like the the execution and the intent behind the perfumes feels like something entirely different and alien, and like almost as if it exists in a different dimension,
Yeah.
to what like your modern niche fragrances smell like. I'd go back. I don't mean to pick on Clune Keen. The perfumes are well made and they've got decent materials. They are just nothing you haven't smelled before, and that's the
Yeah.
point. These
Yeah.
Maîtres Parfums Elegantiers and these Timbuktus were like nothing you have ever smelled before.
Yes.
Completely off the wall,
Yes.
removed from from um, from what came before, and frankly, what came since.
Yeah.
So I don't
Real
know if
point of
it's
view. Yeah. Real point of
sorry.
view. A real point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's I don't know if they're the outlier, if it was ever thus. Like if me and you were having this conversation back in 1990 and we were looking back over the history of perfume 35, 40 years like removed, like from like the Second World War to the night to
Mm.
1990, like would we be saying, oh, there's like 1,000 opium flankers released every year,
That's
and
a
like
great.
I'm sick, like yeah,
Yeah.
is that is was it ever thus? I don't know. It just
Yeah.
feels like we are stuck in this hamster wheel of perfume that just goes round and
Yeah.
round, and the view never changes, but you never stay still. You know, like you've got this. You're exerting energy. You're exerting. The pressure is being exerted upon you. You are being shown, and you've got so much choice without having any without having any choice at all.
Yep.
Like you want to buy a designer fragrance, you could buy A as easily as you could buy Z, and
Yes.
there wouldn't be that much difference in between. You know,
Hmm.
the if you're looking at releases purely from if you're looking at releases purely from say 2010 to now, you know
Yeah.
like before that, even before that, this didn't happen overnight, but it just feels like it's been distilled, like the
Yes.
creativity aspect has been distilled out of the end products.
I agree completely, Rich. I feel like it's been supercharged, or it's just it's present in this way that, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, it's unprecedented. Exactly what you say, and thank you so much. I'm actually gonna, if it's okay, we'll just speak for another 5 minutes, and then I'm gonna go. I did promise my 5-year-old that we were gonna do a water balloon fight, and so he's anxious for me to to get off so that we can go out in the backyard and have a little fun.
Okay.
But if it's okay, I will say just thank you so much for being here. This has been the most amazing, enlightening conversation for me. I'm going to keep thinking about all of these things for quite a long time, and hopefully we can talk again about it. Real quick before we go, I want to ask your advice, maybe to give us a recommendation for a fragrance. So for me, I'm at the part of the year. It's kind of like late summer, fall has not started. We have not had one crisp fall day yet at all. That's still a while away, at least here where I live, and the weather it's in the Midwest. We still have a lot of hot, humid days left. And I'm at the point where I'm struggling to find things to wear because I've gone through my tropical florals. I've been wearing citrus. I've been wearing colognes. I've been wearing my summer fragrances. We have a very long. I was in Taiwan where it's very tropical, hot and humid, and then in general where I live, it's a very hot, humid, long summer. I'm kind of at this place where I'm a little bit sick of all my summer fragrances, and every year around this time, I kind of get antsy for what to wear. I've been enjoying Naviglio by Milano Fragrance. Naviglio is what I would say, in my opinion, is kind of a white t-shirt fragrance. It has a really prominent note of Marseille soap that I love. And
Ooh.
so and it's the kind of Marseille soap that is not a typical, like we've been talking, these kind of very commercial, like shower gel fragrances. I don't want that. I don't want a shower gel fragrance. I take plenty of showers. I don't want to smell like shower gel, but it's better, way better than that. It's a beautiful, like really fancy kind of hard soap kind of scent. It smells like old fashioned dry cleaning, like that my grandmother used to get way back in the day. It smells different. It's a soap fragrance that doesn't smell like every shower gel you've ever smelled. It doesn't smell commercial. It smells interesting and new. And for me, it smells a little old fashioned and a little fancy, like someone just coming from the barber shop. kind of a thing. And it also it's a little aquatic. The story behind the fragrance is that apparently in Milan there was this place where way back in the day when you had your laundry done, it was done by women and men who would wash it by hand with soap in a canal. And it's supposed to kind of represent the sense of that experience. So it's supposed to be a little bit aquatic, have a little bit of mineral. And I do get mineral in this fragrance to like represent the stones that they would wash it against. And again, that really big Marseille soap accord, which I definitely is very prominent to me. It's like a hard white soap fragrance, kind of a scent. And a little bit of and then a little bit in the dry down, it's just a very, very light kind of a musk, just very clean. And that's the only one that I've really been enjoying lately, but I'm really looking for something else to wear. It's a little, maybe it's a fougere or I don't know what, but I don't know if you have any recommendations for this kind of like, it's the end of the summer. You really want fall to start. You really want cold weather. I don't know what to wear these days.
I have Cologne Officinale by Healy, which also has that Marseille soap vibe and accord, and it's got a little bit of amber in the base, and it's very dry, very good for humidity because it's very dry. But the fragrance that I would actually recommend that you try or wear if you haven't already is Eau de Sud by Annick Goutal.
Nice.
I have a vintage bottle of Eau de Sud, and it has slightly kind of citrus herbal top, with lime and lemon verbena and mint, bergamot. It's got an absolutely stunning top, and then it dries down to this green mossy base. And it is quite old fashioned, but it's got an Eau Sauvage kind of vibe to it as well. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's perfect for this kind of summer to autumn transition, very late summer, because the nights are starting to put in, as my mother says. The nights are getting longer, the days are getting shorter, and something with a little bit of vetiver in at this time of year. Because it's still green, but it's got a little bit of darkness to it. It's got a little bit of threat lurking, and I think that Eau de Sud, Southern Water, is absolutely spot on. In fact, I might wear that tomorrow. Now I've said that.
Sounds amazing. Okay, you guys heard it here. Annick Goutal, Eau de Sud. I'm going to go and get a sample immediately. That sounds amazing. You said lime. Oh my God, I want lime, right? Like that's it. That's Keith. That's the thing that's perfect. Lime.
Yes.
The oak moss, the lemon verbena, all of that sounds absolutely perfect for late summer. Oh my gosh, Duck, I wonder if you have time and if you want to, but maybe because you do such great lists on your own. Everyone check out Rich Mitch on his YouTube channel. The best videos. Please check them out. Maybe if you want to, or one of these days or years, doing a late summer fragrance list. Because this suggestion is amazing and I can't wait. Because I always struggle during this time of year. That suggestion is, thank you so much. It was so cool to hang out, and I hope that we can hang out. I'm sure we will again soon, have some more fun talks. I'm going to go play water balloons, and I hope that have a wonderful day. And bye, everybody. And check out Rich Mitch. I'll put his details for his YouTube down below. And see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.